You've just hit upon Discovery class. Thanks for dropping by. My granddaughter is in high school now. When she was 3 years old, she replied to every request with these same words. There are only two. Honey, take off your muddy boots there at the door. I don't. Sweetheart, will you help Mommy dry the dishes? I don't. Okay, it's bath time. Up the stairs you go. I don't. It's bedtime. Come and brush your teeth before you go to bed. I don't. Will you help Grandpa pick up your things from off the floor? I don't. Well, God spoke to a 3-year-old senior citizen. And God had similar requests, and he gave similar answers. He asked him nicely 4 times to do something, and Moses gave the same answer. I don't. I'll read it for you. Exodus chapter 3, verse 7. God said to Moses, I've taken a good look at the affliction of my people down there in Egypt. And I've heard their cries for deliverance from their slave masters. And I know all about their pain. And now, I've come down to help them and pry them loose from the grip of the Egyptians. And I'm going to get them out of that country. And I'm going to bring them to a good land with wide open spaces, a land lush with milk and honey. Right now, it's full of Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. But it's time for you, Moses, to get back there, and I'm going to be sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out. Moses replied, I don't. 40 years have passed. Moses has all the qualifications and he has all the gifts under his belt to enter the world stage as one of the world's greatest leaders. And he's got the best preparation that money can buy, trained in the Ivy League of the academics of the Egyptians. And then come these words in Exodus chapter 3, verse 10. Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. Now, the order was very simple. So straightforward. It wasn't complicated. First, I will send you. Second, you will bring my people out. Looking back over your life and mine, did God ever give you instructions and you replied just like Moses? I don't. Well, we've all done it. And you're not alone. Do you want to know why we say I don't? It's because when God asks us to do something, we think we've got to do it all by ourselves. God told Moses, when I send you down, I'm going to be with you. In other words, God is saying, you don't have to do it, Moses. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do all the work. You're just going to be my instrument, and I'm going to do all the heavy lifting. I'm the deliverer, not you. I have a plan. I'll carry it out. And I'm going to pull it off. All I'm asking of you, Moses, you're my helper. You'll be my tool. That's all. Just be available. In other words, God tells Moses, it's my reputation that's on the line, not yours. Just leave the driving to me. What does Moses do? Well, the same thing you and I do. I don't. In our lesson today, God is going to instruct Moses to leave Midian, the wilderness, where he's been living for 40 years, and he's going to return to Egypt. 4 simple instructions Moses is going to receive from the Lord. And to each of these requirements, Moses is going to listen, and then he's going to reply with the same answer. I don't. Well, I want you to take the word don't, D-O-N-T, just 4 letters. And they're going to apply to these 4 requests that God's going to make of Moses. And I'll explain them, because they're each one a resistance. Here's the first one that he's going to ask. Out of don't is the word D, and I've written the word dawdle, meaning wasting my time. D, dawdle. The next one is O. I've called it obstinate. It means determined to have your own way. Well, then the third word out of don't is the word N, and I've written the word negligent, meaning habitually failing in the required thing you've been asked to do. And then finally, T, out of don't, I have the word trifle. It means of little value. It means to act jokingly. Laugh it off. Okay, let's look at those 4. Each one an excuse that Moses makes. First, dawdle. Verse 8, Exodus 3. God speaks to Moses, it's time for you to go back. I'm sending you back to Pharaoh, to my people, the people of Israel, and you're going to lead them out. Verse 11, Moses answers God, why me? What makes you think that I ever could go to Pharaoh and lead the children of Israel out of Egypt? He dawdles. Don't waste my time. I'm not going to do that. God continues in verse 12. I'll be with you. That's all the proof that you need. When you bring my people out, you will worship me right here in this very mountain where we're standing. Moses looks at the mountain. He listens to the voice of God, and he gives the answer. I don't. He dawdles. Are any of you out there basketball fans? If you are, we're right in the month of March. And the month of March in American basketball, Laurel, is really the highlight reel of their entire season. For the NCAA have their playoffs called March Madness. We're right in the middle of it right now. College basketball has 64 teams that are seeded, and the national tournament is built around those 64 seeds. Every game is really a sudden death. If you lose, you're out. If you win, you stay on. And the winner, at the tail end, he becomes the national basketball champion of the U.S. college basketball. As I speak, March Madness is half over. Half of the games have been played. All the teams left now are in what they call the final 16. One of those teams is Michigan State University from Lansing, Michigan. I like that school because I lived in Michigan and I got a degree down there when I pastored a church. Their head coach at the University of Michigan is a man by the name of, or Michigan State rather, is a man by the name of Tom Izzo. He's been the Spartan coach for 25 years, and he's a wonderful coach. He's been to the Sweet 16 tournament 6 times with his players, and he's become the national champion once. And they've never really been a high-seeded team anytime they've gone into the playoffs. They're usually 5th, 6th, 7th, out of a scale of 1 to 15. This week, they knocked off the University of Marquette, who was a 2nd seed, and they're now advancing to Sweet 16, to the playoffs. I want to talk about that coach, Tom Izzo. He coached the Spartans for now almost 3 decades. As a person, he reflects character, and he really reflects a lot of toughness. And he wears his emotions sometimes right on his shirt sleeve. He cries in front of his team. He cries in front of the national television audience. And he's been told to cry in front of his wife and kids. But as a basketball coach, he can't stand dawdling. He won't allow any of his players to dawdle. If you do, he says, you're wasting my time. 5 weeks ago, on the campus of the University of Michigan State, a gunman, a serial killer, he entered Berkeley Hall, and he took his gun, and he opened fire, and he killed 3 of the students, and he wounded many more. The university was devastated. Another mass killing, right there in their presence. 2 days later, Coach Izzo, he stood in front of the student body in a candlelight vigil, and he poured his heart out in front of all those students for 8 minutes. Here's what he said. Virtually all my life, as an adult, I've been a Spartan. I've seen some inevitable highs, and yes, I have unfortunately today seen some devastating lows. But as a Spartan, we always get through it together. Izzo, over the next few days, is going to take his 6-seeded basketball team, the non-dawdlers, and they're into the middle of the Sweet 16. I'm going to be very interested to see how far they go. Not many of his players are going to go on from his team to the NBA to become professional basketball players. But to a man, his mediocre team, they don't have a lot of talent, but they rise for the moment. They play way beyond their depth. And that gift really is Tom Izzo. He's the coach. And all he asks from his players, don't dawdle. In other words, don't you say to me, I don't. I wouldn't be surprised if that team doesn't go all the way. Moses didn't go all the way. God said to him, I want you to go back. You're on my team. I'm the coach. But don't dawdle. His answer? No. O is the next letter. I entitled it obstinate. It's the second letter in the word don't. It means determined to have your own way. That's an obstinate person. Verse 13. Then Moses said to God, suppose I go to the people of Israel and I tell them, the God of my fathers sent me to you, and they ask me, well, what's his name? What am I going to tell them? Moses is building his case to be obstinate, determined to have his own way. You can almost predict the next words that are going to be on his lips when God speaks to him again. I don't. Verse 15. God replied, this is what you say when you go down and talk to Pharaoh. Here it is. You tell those Israelites whom you're going to speak to, I am God, the I am. I'm the God of your father. I'm the God of Abraham. I'm the God of Isaac. And I'm the God of Jacob. And he sent me. And Moses listened. And God said to him, I want you to go down. You'll be safe. You have my promise. I will not leave you or forsake you. Will you go, Moses? Moses stubbornly looked at him and said, I don't. Not me. I'm not going back there. I'm not leaving my wife and child here. I'm not leaving my father-in-law Jethro. I'm not leaving the sheep. I'm not listening to you. And I don't care what you say your name is. Don't count on me to go down there and boast about your name and they're going to believe me. They won't. So my answer is, I don't. The third letter in the word don't is the word N. I'm calling it negligent, meaning habitually failing to do the required thing. Verse 10. Moses again is speaking. Master, please. I don't talk well. I've never been good with words. Neither before nor after. When you speak to me, have you noticed I stutter and I stammer? So God, don't you hear what I'm saying? If that's my personality and that's how I deliver my speech and you want me to go and talk to who? I'm negligent, I don't. Verse 11, God said, and who do you think your mouth is? Who do you think made your mouth? Some are mute. Some are deaf. Some are sighted. Some are blind. Didn't I do it? So get going. I'll be right there with you, Moses. I'll be your mouth. I will teach you what to say. The words will come right out from me in you. I don't, said Moses. Milton Hershey was the only child of Henry and Fanny Hershey, born September the 13th, 1857, on a farm in Drury County, Pennsylvania. He was a very poor student in school, and he was an only child. He stuttered and he stammered. So he quit school when he was only 14 years of age. It was right about that time that his father left his mother. And Milton was raised by a single mom there on the farm, just a young boy. And because he stuttered, he didn't like reading or writing, and he hardly ever wrote anything in his entire life. He became very negligent. He kept failing in everything. Fanny, his mother, never gave up on him. When he came in from the barn and he brought the fresh milk, he gave it to his mom, and she began to teach her son the properties of milk. He watched her separate the milk from the cream, and out came buttermilk. He watched her take the cream, and from the cream, she even contrived little magic items called caramel. Fanny, Milton's mother, was a preacher's kid. She was the daughter of a Mennonite clergyman, and she poured her life into her only son, Milton. And there on the farm, when Milton would say to her, Mom, I'm no good. Life for me is just a great big I don't. I stutter, I stammer. My dad's gone, he's a failure. So here am I with you, what am I going to do? Fanny, his mother, was very strict. You're not a stutterer, she said. And she forced her son to do all kinds of chores. And it was there that she instilled into her son an appreciation for very hard work. And at the age of 18, Milton Hershey, he borrowed $150 from his aunt to start a little candy store in downtown Philadelphia. to sell his mother's candy. He perfected, he experimented, and his candy making began to grow. Customers began to come. Store began to fill up. He learned from his mother's kitchen that there could be a whole gift of candy making that nobody else could do. Only he could do it. There, from that little candy store, was born the Hershey Chocolate Company. It began as the Lancaster Caramel Company. And in 1900, at the turn of the century, he bought hundreds of acres in the central part of Pennsylvania, and he built a large chocolate manufacturing plant, one of the biggest in the world. His name was Milton Snavely Hershey. Remember that name. You've all eaten Hershey chocolate bars? Well, that was him. Have any of you had any Kiss candies? That was him. How about, did you give your kids any M&Ms? That was him. That was Hershey. Hershey determined to keep finding new formulas, just like his mother taught him back in the kitchen on the barn in the farm. He began to mass produce and mass distribute milk chocolate candy all over the world. And you know, Hershey's wealth began to expand. He built a town around that factory called Hershey, Pennsylvania. Hershey built schools because he didn't go to school. He built parks, churches, recreation facilities, housing for his employees. He even added a trolley system from their house down to the factory so they could go to work. In 1909, with his wife Catherine, now they didn't have any children. They were childless all their marriage. Together they built what was called the Hershey Industrial School. It was a facility for orphan boys. It later became a landing spot for girls. Girls were included in that. That school was full of dropouts, kids that stammered, kids that stuttered. They couldn't read or write. And many of those kids probably came to the school with a great big monopoly. They said, I don't. Well, Hershey remembered what he learned on the farm. He became better than an I don't. His mother said, I'll teach you what to say. You're going to become a very successful man, my son, if you listen to your mom and you follow my instructions. Well, that's all God asked of Moses. What did he say? I don't. Negligent. There's an interesting sidelight to Hershey. When he and his wife Catherine celebrated their wedding anniversary in 1912, Hershey gave his wife a gift. Do you know what it was? First class tickets in the highest part and the best part of a new ocean liner called the Titanic. And just before they were going to go to Britain and get on that boat and come across on the maiden voyage, they had an interruption at the business and he couldn't go. Isn't that interesting? His ticket for $300 that he paid for first class travel on that boat is in his museum in Hershey, Pennsylvania. You can go and see it. Well, finally, don't has a word called T at the end. I call it trifle. The word trifle means little value. It's like acting jokingly. If a person is kind of trifling, he really doesn't have much of an authority. He takes things very flippantly, very lightly. Verse 15. "O Master," says Moses, "please send somebody else. Anybody but me. Please don't send me." All right. When I left seminary, I pastored a rural church on a gravel road back in Ontario. The church was located on a corner just across the street from a one-room schoolhouse. Our church had no running water. It had a his and hers bathroom, but they were chemical toilets that had to be cleaned out every week by our volunteer janitors. They each had to take a turn, and they had to dispose of that. The baptistry, we had a lovely baptistry, but we had no water. One of our farmers had to come with a 1,000-gallon tank on the back of his tractor and wagon and fill it up. We didn't have anything to heat it with. All they had was just some of those electrodes that go down into the milk pail at milking time. And it only heated the top of the water, and you had to stir it with a canoe paddle constantly so that they at least be the same temperature. 2 people in that church laid the foundation under me to become a pastor. Over the next 7 years that I was there, they were a couple, Eileen and Henry, farmers. They had 3 grown children. One of their boys was a doctor. Eileen was our church pianist, Sunday school teacher. Henry was a deacon. They lived 3 miles from the church. I never saw a couple that adored each other more than the 2 of them. But Henry was a very shy man. Eileen, she was an Alka-Seltzer. She just bubbled all the time when you saw her. Henry could never speak in public. When we'd have a communion service, although he was a deacon, when it came time for him to pray over the elements, I had to do it for him. He did a strange thing one day. He came by the church with his wife, and he asked me to come with him for a ride. When I got in the car, Henry told me that he wanted me to go and meet his parents. So I drove about 15 miles, they driving, and he told me nothing about who they were. Driving through the gate of a small cemetery, he said to me, "Ron, here's where they live." And he pointed over there to the hill, and he showed me a tombstone where both his mother and his father were buried. We got out of the car, we walked to that tombstone, and there the 3 of us stood very quietly, all alone. Henry didn't speak. And then Eileen did. She said, pointing to the parents' names, "This couple that you're looking at gave me the greatest gift that I could ever have in my lifetime." She took Henry's arm and she gazed into his tearful face. She said, "My father-in-law and my mother-in-law, I never met. They both died when Henry was just a young man. He told me what great parents he had. They were both humble Christians going to a small church. They taught Henry how to become a Christian. They pointed him to his Savior." Well, he didn't let them down. Before we were married, Henry was the one who introduced me to his parents' Savior. And I'm here to tell you that I'm the proudest wife standing beside the greatest man, because I think what those 2 did, and I've never seen them, I want to be just like them, and I want to do it too. You know, when I heard the 2 of them, I thought I was standing underneath 2 great sugar maple trees. It takes a long time to grow a sugar maple. It took a long time to grow a Henry and an Eileen. But you know, when I watched those 2 and I saw them in their life, all they did in our little church was pour out pure maple syrup spiritually to whoever came in the door. It was Henry on his tractor that brought the water down for the baptistry. I can't tell you the things he did for that church. I remember one night we had a hayride And we invited all the other churches in the community, United Church, Catholic, Presbyterian, they all came. We had close to 80 young people. It was Henry's tractors and Henry's wagons and his hay that we went up and down the roads, and we laughed and giggled and had the greatest time. All those young people from all over. When we got to the church, we had to have our refreshments, but the next morning, remember, now these are volunteer janitors that are cleaning the church. And there was hay everywhere. There was hay on the piano. There was hay on the walls. There was hay up and down the slide. Every place, bathrooms are full of hay. Well, the poor guys that did the volunteering that week, they were so upset. And the word got around, and finally we had to have a special church meeting. And then what they wanted to do was no more hay rides. That's it. That's the end of hay rides. They'll never have another hay. I'll never forget what Henry did. When it finally got quiet and the meeting calmed down, someone asked Henry, what do you think? I'll never forget his answer. Do you know what he did? I didn't think he'd speak. He was very shy. He stood up and he looked at the crowd and he said this, it's only hay. Next time, when we have a hayride, Eileen and I will clean the church. Never forgot that. Moses, how would you like to go down to Egypt? I've got 4 things I can help you with and want you to do. I don't. When you come back next week, I'm going to tell you what Moses' life is all about. Do you think he's going to change his mind? Do you think God's going to pick somebody else? Well, you come back and see. I'll tell you.